Welcome, Julie. Thank you for joining us today. I think the best place to start is if you could give us an update about your career and where you are now. That'd be amazing. Thank you.
When I left school in 1985, it was 3.5 million people unemployed, and every job said age 25 plus. And my mother was a nurse, so I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. And that was that. That was the end of it. That was all of those many, 1984 was 40 years ago, isn't it?
Yeah.
40 years later. Oh my God, how the hell did that happen? So I did that for a while. I was obviously in hospitals, then went out into the world of adult social care, which followed on from the 1984 Care Homes Act, which dissolved all of the long stay places in hospitals and put people into the community. So I went and managed and worked in some of those services, both as a manager, nurse, and as a registered. Well, they weren't registered then. It was a very different situation. They were governed by the local authority and the NHS. Did that for a bit. Went and did a bit of working in a college when my daughter was born. So I did college education, got myself a degree in education for age 14 to 35-year-olds, or where it was all the way up. And then ended up working in contracts in St Helens, doing all their contract compliance for all of their stuff. And the development of NCSC, National Care Standards Commission, happened. And I applied for a job, and after spending probably the worst day of my life in Newcastle, which took an entire day to do the entire interview, got a job.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it was awful. You had to do a role play, you had to do an interview, you had to do a psychometric test, you had to do a written exercise. It was an entire assessment day.
No, it sounds full on, especially kind of psychometric tests and role play. Me personally, role plays is not my thing.
It's nobody's thing. What are you talking about?
I'm not even when you had to do them at school, it's kind of like role plays. It's hard to be put into a character that you don't want to be put into.
Well, it wasn't a character. It was supposed to be me doing something else.
Yeah, so it's tricky. Role plays are definitely tricky. So I'm assuming that you got offered the role after that?
Yeah, the role came after that. And so I've spent the next 22 years for CQC. I've been an inspector in adult social care. We did the generic role for a bit as well. So I've inspected doctors, dentists, clinics. Then we divided out and I went back to doing adult social care. And then I went into hospitals and did hospitals. And along the way, had an absolute passion and love for enforcement. And I know that sounds bizarre, but if you break the regulations, that is me. That's the law. End of. But developed the fact that I actually was really good at investigating them and finding the right evidence to say, yes, you broke it. No, you haven't. You know what I mean? So also went and did set up the initial enforcement team. And there was myself and 3 coppers originally, which was really interesting.
Oh, wow.
Because their view of the way that the law was and my view of the way that the law had to be imposed in CQC was radically different. And this was the criminal. So this was the start of the criminal stuff. Because if you think about it, police think about it in a different way.
For sure.
They have a crime and they go and look for the perpetrator to see who committed that crime. Well, in CQC, it's the other way around. Is there a crime? And we already know who the perpetrator is. So are the innocent, we already know who the perpetrator is. So what lines of inquiry say they did this or they didn't do it? What was the evidence? And, all of this, beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
So, you have to be absolutely convinced that the evidence says
for sure.
This happened and happened in that way. So we did all of that as well. Did mental health. Can't think of anything I didn't do in 22 years.
Amazing.
What drove me out was we had gone through this was the 4th major transition change. So I'd gone from NCSC to CSCI, CSCI to CQC, and then this one as well. So we'd had several transitions along the way. And this was possibly the biggest, poorly managed, staff demotivating role and skill remover that we'd ever had. And the writing was so obviously on the wall that I was already clearly thinking about it. However, during COVID, despite the fact that people think we didn't do any inspections during COVID, we did. And I got COVID 3 times from inspecting
Oh,
accidents and
wow.
emergency units, and ended up with long COVID.
Oh, no. And
So
is it still impacting you now, or you kind of?
it's significantly less.
Yeah.
It's significantly less,
Oh,
but
good.
it means no full-time job because I'm
Yeah.
just not capable of it. Unless you want to see me sleep for a week afterwards, which is highly likely. So that's me in a nutshell. That's it.
Amazing.
What
No.
else? Well, amazing. It's just a bit, there's 40 odd years worth of a career in there. What do you expect?
Yeah, no,
I
for
keep
sure.
forgetting. I'm 60 this year. I
Yeah,
keep
you don't look
forgetting I'm
it.
that
You
old.
don't look it.
Yeah, you have to say that. You do understand that absolutely is an obligation.
So in terms of CQC, if we take it back a little bit,
Okay.
from when you first got involved to now, what has been the because especially at the moment, you'd see it's getting a lot of negative press. There's a lot of backlog. There's
It's always going to get
people
negative
wait,
press.
and I think that's the care sector as a whole gets very negative press.
Yeah.
But I guess what significant changes have kind of from where you kind of started to now, what's the
Well,
key?
if you want to go back to 2002, you need to remember that the only way to get the internet was on dial-up.
Yeah.
So I used to plug my So we had lots of local offices. So and we often would go to a local office. But if you work from home, I used to plug my computer in, go upstairs, get washed, get dressed, come down, have my breakfast, make a cup of coffee, drink the cup of coffee, and it might have actually dialed
Yeah.
up.
I remember the old dial-up noise.
Yeah, and it went. Oh, yeah, I missed that dial-up noise. It was
Yeah.
almost exciting that noise that
Yeah,
went
yeah.
off.
No, it was
Yeah.
great.
So the technology was not there. The level of it. Didn't have a mobile phone. Well, we did, but that came a bit later. But there was these clunky BlackBerry efforts, not smartphones. You couldn't, all of that kind of stuff. We didn't have the system on a computer, so we used to write up all of our notes in what was known as the Blue Book. So every service had a big blue book, and when you went to do an inspection or a complaint or anything else like that, you came into the office, you got the blue book, and you took the blue book out. You wrote all of your notes in the blue book, and the blue book came back. It's for the next person to be able to pick up. So we had all of that blue book system. So there was massive amounts of blue book storage. It was mainly for adult social care, and we did kind of rate them. Although I must admit, I've never agreed with ratings for things like NHS and things like that. I get it if you want to know whether this is going to be a good care home for your granny. I get it for that. But, for your doctors, you can walk away. Your dentist, you can walk away. For your hospital, you can't walk away. Nobody hops onto the ambulance and says, by the way, what's your rating?
Yeah, no, of course.
It doesn't happen. Nobody goes, don't take me to that A&E. It's rated as inadequate. It just doesn't happen. Take me to the nearest. I need to be dealt with. So those kinds of things doesn't happen. We weren't as remote working, so we had really quite tight, good teams, and we all worked really quite well with each other. And because it was fairly new, we all had to learn together. So there was a whole load of different ways of doing things, and from there they'd amalgamated all of the social services and all of the hospitals into one. And this had been all of these people doing things differently. I all had to do it the same. So technology came in. We went through Inspecting for Better Lives. We went through CRM systems. We went through the regulatory platform as it is now, IT, all of that kind of stuff. The regulations changed, as you know, because they changed when they went into CQC. The organisation got bigger and bigger and bigger. At one point, I would be able to go to a meeting and know everybody in that room. And it ended up I'd walk in a meeting and know about 20%.
Oh, wow.
And part of that, not just because, but we, there was no intelligence team. We had a whole intelligence team created. There was no policy team. There was a whole policy team created. It was literally the inspectors and everybody else. They were made, it was an operational team. There was no kind of strategic structure around it. And it just fed up that way. Now there's a whole load of support mechanisms. I think there's about 50% of the staff actually aren't even going out and doing inspections or assessments.
Yeah.
So the structure of it is radically different.
Yeah, and how many people work for the CQC now? Is it kind
I
of
have no
no
idea.
idea?
Thousands.
That's big. But in terms of kind of the reports that you kind of see now is kind of, waiting for CQC inspections, backlog, it's all COVID's full. Is
That's
there
not new.
Yeah. Is there ways, is it to do with there isn't enough inspectors, or is there too many services looking to open at one given time, or is it a mixture
It's
of
a mixture of
both?
those, and then add in the systems and the fact that currently at the present moment in time, they're all trying to learn a new system that isn't. Whenever you put a new IT system in place, it's never quite fit for purpose. It
Yeah,
never is.
no, agreed.
Because it's a theoretical discourse until the point in time you actually operationalise it. So you've got to get all of those kinks out of it. And that can take a lot of time because quite often you've actually got to bugger the whole thing up several times to understand what it is that's not working. So the system in process, the IT system, the structure around it, that is still infantile and embryonic. So it's not going to work as well as it should be. And the argument would be, well, why couldn't you have phased that through? Because you cannot have a country where you operate half the law in one way and half the law in the other way. It just, you've got to go all or nothing. You can't go down to London and do inspection under that way and then up to the north and do some inspection in a completely different way. That's just, by its very nature, disproportionate and unfair. So unfortunately, you have to suck up the pain of a new change in this manner. And the question becomes, why did you change? Well, we had to. CQC had to, because CCGs disappeared and ICBs came on board. So there had to be an alignment. And some of it was clunky, wasn't quite functioning. I mean, you had all the Chloes, which are a load of twaddle. And now you've got quality statements, which are also a load of twaddle, and don't quote me on either of those.
Yeah.
Because none of those are law. A Chloe is not law, a quality statement is not law, an evidence category is not law. The regulations are law. So as somebody who worked in the organisation for that many years, I'll never learn a Chloe, and if I was still there, I wouldn't learn a quality statement. What I would be doing is making sure I knew what the regulations were and whether they were meeting them or not, and then I'd report on it based on the quality statements. So, because they've got sections and headings, safeguarding, lessons learned, all of that kind of stuff. And they're not radically different to the headings that we've been using for the last couple of years anyway. And, in hospital, those were the headings in general. So all they've kind of done is combine the Chloes, get rid of them and turn them into the quality statements, and then create a system that ran across adult social care, hospitals and PMS, so that when you got a report, it looked the same. And that, because they diversified so much. And what you were getting was silo working. So the big problem was, and it was particularly evident in COVID, that you would have these issues with the hospitals discharging patients to care homes and care homes going, hang on. So there was a shed load of this silo working where you were in hospitals, didn't see the impact it was having on care homes. And if you were in care homes, didn't see what the impact was in hospitals. So that whole patient journey, because nobody goes to one place, you've got a GP, you're in a care home, and you go to hospital. They're all fragmented there. So that patient journey was getting fragmented and you couldn't see what was happening. So there was intelligence that was getting missed because you'd have a road care home off somewhere that was complaining about the hospital and all of that. So the silo working didn't work. So that was one of the reasons for pulling it all together and turning it into a single assessment framework. So there was good logical reasons for the changes. It was kind of able to move forward a little bit. And I'm not a CQC fan, by the way, so before we get there. Able to move through a little bit through COVID because it gave a bit of capacity to be able to start thinking about it. How they went about it and the rationalisation and the systems they chose defeats me, because I couldn't think of anything more complex and ridiculous when I can think of 20 ways to make it a lot easier. This division of making the inspector's role an inspector and an assessor, taking away portfolio management, removing the provider relationships management systems. This defeats me. And I can kind of see why providers are sketchy about it. But actually, if I were them, I'd be jumping for joy, because this is so open to challenge and so open for them to be able to go, well, that's fine. We're going to get that sorted. We can do all of that, and I'll challenge this and I'll challenge that, because actually it plays dramatically right into their hands. So if I were the providers, I'd be dancing up and down. But they all seem to be panicking.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've spoken, we've been recruiting in this space for a long time. We speak with consultants, we've spoken with providers, managers, and it's been published reports of a lot of managers leaving because of the pressures of CQC reports,
And I don't
CQC.
think it's CQC reports. And I think if you were walking around as a manager and having been a manager and say it's the pressures of CQC, I would question either your sanity or your truth,
Yeah,
because that's not possible. Because CQC will not be interfering in your life to that degree. I would actually say it's the ability to recruit good staff. It's the ability to get the providers to spend the money in the right places. It's the fact that this is a very, very much seen as a second-class place to go and work, and that's just not acceptable. The skills I required when I was working in a care home were significantly more than those I required while I worked on a ward, because if something went tits up, I didn't have an emergency team to call. Somebody's at your door, by the way. I didn't have an emergency team to call. I couldn't dial and create a crash team. I had to deal with it. So, there was no backup systems in a care home in the same way as it's in a hospital. And, if the washing machine broke down while I was on duty and people weren't going to get clean laundry, I had to deal with it.
yeah,
So the things and the skills that you needed in a care home could be significantly more, and more, not just medical. So I don't. If a manager is telling me it's because of CQC, I'm going to question that significantly, because it doesn't interfere in your life that much.
yeah. No, 100%. And I can see it from that point of view very clearly. And I think speaking with I had a chat a few weeks ago with a lady called Amanda, who's like a management consultant that goes across care providers, giving them support and stuff like that. And I think part of the issue we discussed is, I think there's too many owners open up CQC services that don't have direct history within the care sector. So actually how they can provide that management upper level support to
Because they don't need to.
Yeah, which I think is something that needs
That's
to
a
be
flaw. I know, it's a
be
flaw.
addressed in the first place. And then it comes down to actual development, support, internal infrastructure to give these managers the actual support they need internally. So actually when it comes through to a CQC report, they're like, right, we're a team here. We've got this has been covered, you're covering that, I'm covered. Do you know what I mean? And they have a full built up team in house, I think.
Yeah, and it's different. And again, that comes down to the capacity and the capability and the willingness of the providers. But if you go back to pre-NCSC days, when it was the local authority and the hospitals, they had managers' meetings on a monthly basis, and the managers would go to those meetings. Some local authorities continue to have those and created network support for them. However, they're the competition.
Yeah.
And it's never easy. It's kind of like trying to get Greggs and Sayers together.
Yes.
And discussing the quality of the recipe for a pizza. It's the competition.
Yeah.
So regardless of anything, this is human beings' feelings that are going to go, oh, maybe not that, maybe that's not a good idea, and all of those kinds of things. Now, if you are part of a bigger organisation, then the aspect of support and managers and team meetings is probably there. But if you've only got 3 or 4 or even one service, you're on your own.
Yeah.
You're on your own. I can remember as an inspector sitting in my car, having done it with an inspection, with a manager who was so struggling with her provider, she was sobbing, and I was feeding her cigarettes for an hour because the whole. And it wasn't me. I wasn't the pressure. CQC wasn't the pressure.
Yeah.
It was the provider's pressure And then she had to deal with CQC to tell them what the provider wanted her to say, which wasn't necessarily going to be accurate.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, CQC inspectors are not stupid. So they know this is a fake record. This is a push in that direction. So, but I sat her in my car and had a cigarette for an hour while she sobbed. And I think the advice I gave her was, no job should make you feel like this.
Yeah, no, without doubt. And I do think there's a lot to say around, not everyone, of course, but around internal operation management infrastructures where, there needs to be better support packages, better wellbeing packages
I mean, if
in
you
place.
look at it this way, the problem is it's contracted. A lot of adult social care is contracted through social services and the health service, and a component that you yourself pay. Because if you lived in your own house, you'd still be paying your own television licence, your gas, your electricity, your food, your rent, all of those kinds of things. So those things that you would have paid anyway had you been in your own home are there, unless you're in a domiciliary care, which is still there. But there's a component that's paid for by the NHS and a component that's paid for by the local authority, all of that kind of stuff. But if it goes wrong and that organisation, for whatever reason, the building's back end's falling off and it's going to be £80,000, which the organisation doesn't have to fix, or the manager disappears because she's decided to run away to Thailand. What a very good idea. Her envy her already, but never mind. There's no support structure to put in if it's a very small service. Now, there did used to be, when there was local authorities and things like that, they could parachute a team in. So, if there was something going wrong, they could parachute. I mean, the provider paid for it. They paid for it. But the local authority, therefore, had these interims, for want of a better phrase. But they could put a manager in, care staff, all of that kind of stuff in, and parachute those in. It wouldn't be possible now, even if that arrangement was in place, because you can't get the staff.
Yeah.
You can't get the nurses. You can't get the manager. You can't pay them enough. Although saying that, it did surprise me how much managers do get paid. Because when CQC started, I would say that my salary was equivalent to a reasonable manager of a reasonable care home.
Yeah.
By the time I'd finished, it was about half.
Yeah, some of the salaries out there at the moment are astronomical. Yeah, it's very eyeball.
Yeah, skyrocketing. But, if you want the best, you're going to have to pay for it. And it's not necessarily by salary, is it? I mean, one of the advantages for working for CQC for all of those years, it wasn't the pay, it was the working conditions, the holidays, all of those kinds of things that you got that were far, far better than if I got out 9 till 5 or 9 till 10:30 every night, that kind of thing. In a care home, I got a pension payment. They didn't. You'd get your own. Holiday pay was better, sick pay was better, all of that kind of stuff. So it was never just the pay, it was always the conditions as well. And to be honest with you, I did like working from home.
No, of course. And I think, if you're looking at, a care home manager, who's the registered manager responsible for the home, you're responsible for it 24/7, regardless if you're there or not, So there's so much, extra pressure, so there needs to be more
there is a lot of pressure.
Support. That's where I think the support piece needs to be bigger, because
where would
ultimately
you advocate it came from, Josh?
Yeah, no, and I think it needs to. I think that needs to come from the provider and the upper management team, and kind of how they can kind of support.
But if you are a single-handed provider,
then what can you do as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
no, for sure.
Got a couple of little services, or you are one domiciliary care service. Where do you get that from? There is nowhere for that support to come from. I deal with people who own it and manage it, and it's a little DCA, and it provides care for 40 people, and it's still, I say it's little, but that's a lot of hours, but that's a lot. Where do you go for that support? There is nowhere for them. There's no systems in place. The NHS has, and this should be part of the ICB's package, to be honest with you, because of the ICB in that local area was looking to make sure that it provided the right care for the people, then it needs to provide the support for the right care for the people. So, why the ICBs aren't looking at how they can do things to support and to stop services failing before they fail. There used to be things like, they've done the NHS would do training for staff in care homes and things like that, and they do. But then they also kind of started putting on the staff things that they shouldn't be putting on them, like a residential care home where they train the staff to give insulin. But that's just not acceptable. You can train them to monitor the insulin levels. You can train them to do the insulin, but then they didn't sign them off appropriately, didn't look after them appropriately. And you go and read a care plan and nobody's actually given them the right things to do for a sliding scale. The danger and the risk of that.
Yeah.
Because the argument was, well, if you lived in your own home, I'd train a member of your family to do that. And you're right, I probably could. But you'd support them more. Because you just leave these guys on their own, don't you? And go and see them once every month or so. Whereas if it was if it was somebody in their own home that wasn't receiving any care other than a district nurse team, you'd be there every other couple of days.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So there's a lot pushed on to care services from an overly stretched NHS that shouldn't be pushed on to care services, and the nature of the people who go into care services radically changed. If you go back to sort of very early 2000s, we actually even had, or even late 90s, we had services called retirement homes for gentle people. And it was people who were basically physically fit and able, but just didn't want to live on their own. So, the likes of extra care now and things like that. So the level of what goes into a nursing and care home now is fundamentally a higher level of care needs than it was, plus the fact they are quite often more multi-pathological disorder because we're living longer.
Yeah,
so
no.
you quite often have lots more disorders because we're living longer. I mean, you look at things like people who have Down syndrome. Now, 30 years ago, the expected life expectancy for most people with Down syndrome was 45, maybe 50. Now they're living beyond 50, but the problem is 90% of them are developing some form of dementia.
Yeah.
So we've now got people who've got an enlarged heart that's being managed, have a learning disability that's being managed, but because they're living longer, are now having another condition imposed on them. I'm not advocating anything other than having that condition imposed on them.
Of course. Yeah.
But we need to recognise that because of the way our society is and because of the longevity that we can now produce, that needs to change the way we think about care and think about care homes. It did used to be that the average life expectancy of somebody moving into a care home was 3 to 5 years, and that wasn't because they killed them off. That was because that was just the way that it was. We didn't live that long. Now, you can have people living in the care home for 12, 15, 20 years now.
Yeah, which is just massive difference,
it's massive,
isn't it?
And it's a very huge difference, and that's because of the way that medical interventions have improved longevity of life.
Yeah.
So, but we need to be looking at that because that's a big impact. That's a big impact. And it's still only 3% of people that end up in a care home, and about, 15% of people that require support in their own homes. My mother-in-law's 91. Nobody goes and sees her.
Yeah.
On average, most people do never need social care support. The majority
Yeah, my
don't.
nan's was 89 a few weeks ago, and she still lives at home, walks and gets her paper in the morning. Perfect, Gets a bit lonely sometimes, but other than that, is perfectly healthy and independent, if you know what I mean. So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's horses for courses, and the problem is with living longer.
Yeah.
You have more medical needs.
Yeah.
So that has a huge impact. And again, I'm not advocating that either. We're not doing soil and green round here, please, because I'm 60 now and I'd really like to live a lot longer. I'd like to get to 120 if possible.
Yeah, no, that'd be some achievement.
Yeah. Yeah, but you know what I mean. I mean,
of course.
The longest lived guy in the world actually lives in Liverpool. He's 111.
It's incredible, really, isn't it? It's incredible.
Yeah.
No, amazing. In terms of, so touch back, I know we touched on it briefly before, but obviously just to be interesting to get your opinion on use care homes as an example. Does there need to be, or should there be tighter regulations about who can actually open a care home, not just because you've got lots of money and you want to put it somewhere. Do you know what I mean? Does there need to be kind of more regulations around?
Okay, let me put it this way. All right. If you were building a house and you commissioned a builder
Yeah,
and told him what you wanted to build the house, why would I expect you to know anything about building? You've actually paid an expert to do it.
yeah,
So you're the one with the money. You're the one paying for them to deliver that. Why would I expect you to know anything about building? You've
yeah,
paid an expert. That's the point. You know, if you are investing as a provider, your job, and it's very clearly in the regulations, you get the right people to do the right job. You commission the builder. You pay for that builder. You find your best builder so that you know that what you're going to get left with is a good building that's not going to fall down 3 months later. I don't need to know as a provider anything about care. What I need to do is recruit the best people to manage that, and then for me to check that they're doing what they are supposed to be doing. The biggest failing in adult social care, and it's very, very common, is it has absolutely no understanding of governance. They seem to think in adult social care governance is auditing and policies and procedures. No, that is not governance. That's a bit of quality tinkering. But that's not governance. Governance is about your culture. It's about how you support your staff. It's about how you put your systems and processes in place so that they actually aren't a paperwork exercise that you fall over. They are of value to people. It's about checking that you've got that assurance, right? So as a provider, I need assurance that you're doing than delivering that care. That means I need evidence. That means I need to have a governance system in place that provides me with very clear, look, we've had a spate of falls recently. We've done this, we've done that, we've done the other, and we can see that they're declining. We've got this action plan into place and we've monitored that, and we can see that that's actually changing it. And it was down to this one particular person. Now, that's a good manager is going to provide that evidence, or a good area manager, for assurance to the provider. And that provider has to have assurance. That's part of their job. They don't need to know anything about care to understand that they're being provided with assurance that this is this and this is this. The weakness is, and there is a weakness, that you can have a very bad rogue manager because it's going to lie their teeth off. Now, they very invariably don't last long anyway because staff suss them out quite quickly. Yeah, or they become quite well known to CQC quite quickly because you start to get complaints and things like that, and whistleblowers come out of that. So again, it's commissioned a good builder, get a good governance system in place, and have that assurance, not reassurance. I mean, I quite often say to people, okay, do you provide good care? And they say things like, well, I think we do. I feel that we do. I want to believe that we do. There's no assurance.
yeah,
It's not. I know we do, and here's the evidence.
yeah, yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. And no, that's a really good way of looking at it.
So that's what they have to have. So the provider has to be satisfied, and it's their responsibility to appoint fit people.
Yeah,
It's their responsibility. Do I agree that the provider should be the NI? No, probably not. And the NI has got the overall accountability and responsibility, and they are not a registered role with CQC. You don't register to be an NI. But you have to, as the provider, be satisfied that you've appointed the individual with sufficient skills, qualifications and experience to undertake that role.
yeah.
And
No.
that might be that you go outside and recruit a consultant to be the NI. It may very well be that kind of thing. I've seen some providers, which I think is really quite good, start to recruit outside for things like Speak Up Guardians.
Yeah,
Which I think is great because that needs to be outside your system. Because regardless of anything, if you are running a service, you don't see the woods for the trees. And you have your own judgment values on it. So asking them to investigate a complaint, it's kind of like asking me to assess my poor skin this morning. I don't want to do it.
Yeah, no, and it's good to have that unbiased point of view that can kind of come in with a different perspective on.
Yeah, an unbiased point, because we're humans. If you are in that environment, why would you not have a biased point? Of course you do. Of course you do. And you need to recognise, because sometimes you find that they've got, I don't know, I've seen it a few times. You've got a particular resident or relative that is the vexatious, consistent complainer, and staff start to turn off to it because they're just constantly whinging. Now, it doesn't mean they've not got a valid point. And it may actually be that what you needed to do was have a better conversation from the very beginning, and they're no longer the vexatious, ongoing complainer. I'll tell you my cup of tea story, because this is the one I use, and it's actually very true. So let's say this lady called Mary was being discharged from hospital, and she was going to a care home. She was only going to stay there 6 weeks while they upgraded her house with the right shower and the stair lift and all of that kind of stuff. So she was not invested in spending any time in this care home, because I'm going home in 6 weeks. This is just a short stay. And they put this lady on the top floor in this quite large care service. She didn't want to come out. I don't need to be speaking to these people. These are not going to be my friends. You know what I mean? I'm going to just spend 6 weeks in this room and do what I want to do. And there's lots of people who don't come out their rooms. They like to spend time in the room. And I should imagine if it was me in a care home, I'd be one of them. I don't like people, so yeah. But there's the usual cup of tea round, isn't there? Because everybody wants a cup of tea. So the usual cup of tea round. So Mary's on the top floor at the end room. So the first day she's there, the first cup of tea she gets is cold, because it's a while to go down that corridor with those cups of tea. So she tells the care staff the cup of tea is cold. And they go, right, oh, okay then, I'll get you a fresh cup of tea, and make her a fresh cup of tea. So this goes on all day. So every time the cup of tea round comes round, her cup of tea is cold. She tells the care staff, and they rightly go and get her a fresh cup of tea. But nobody's actually logged the fact that actually this is a problem in the first place. So 4 days in, Mary's now had somewhere in the region of 21, 22 cups of tea that are cold. Yeah. So what's your first thought? They can't even get a cup of tea right. What else are they doing wrong? This turned into possibly the most vexatious, not vexatious, it wasn't vexatious, it was true. The most bitter complaints I've ever had to deal with, because the whole family then started to look for every little thing. And regardless of anything, there's always going to be a little thing, isn't
Yes.
there? Nobody's perfect. Because if they can't even get a cup of tea right, what else can they not get right?
Yeah.
And it was absolutely spot on. And all it took was somebody at the very beginning doing something and saying, look, Mary's not happy that this has happened. Somebody, one member of staff going, actually, this is a complaint. This is a registration dissatisfaction. This is a complaint. Let's deal with it as a complaint. Let's manage it here and now as though it's a complaint. But if Mary's cup of tea is cold, what about the lady next door who's got dementia? Because theirs must be cold too.
Yeah.
But she can't tell me. Hang on, this is a big can of worms. We need to be looking at this and seeing what else we can do with our system. Do we need a hot thing round the tea trolley, round the whatever? What's our lessons learned? This is all what CQC would be telling you need to do from one small cup of tea. But it's perfectly logical that you would. And it's perfectly logical that... And why would you need to know anything about care to work out the cup of tea is cold?
Yeah.
It's not rocket science. It's not rocket science. It is common sense. It is. What would I want if I lived there? What would I want from my mum if she was there? I used to, when I first started in CQC, I was in my 30s, and I used to have what Andrea Sutcliffe then later pinched off me and called was the mum's test, but it wasn't. It's mine. And I used to say to residents when I went to the care home, would my nan be happy here? Well, I was in my 30s. Then it changed to, would my mum be happy here? And I kind of think I'm getting to the point of time where I'm going, would I be happy here? Which is really bothering me.
But it's a great test of working out how things are, though, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's a very simple way of assessing performance levels.
Well, you just ask the people who live there, would my nan be happy here? And it's a very, and about 50-50, I've got a positive and a negative. Or, well, the other question you used to ask them is, do you consider it home? Because if your head is telling you it's home, it's good. And that's always a struggle for people because they've left their home. Do you consider this place now home? And particularly when you're looking at sort of like learning disabilities or things like that, that's a good indicator.
Yeah, no, for
Does
sure.
it feel like home? We moved a few years ago, well, several years ago, we moved from a smaller house to another house. And it was a much nicer house. But for the first 3 weeks, I was downstairs every night, sitting downstairs crying because it wasn't home. It took me a while to get for it to be home. But it wasn't my home because my home was the one I just left. Because it's a state of mind, isn't it?
Yeah, and especially when you've been somewhere for a long time as well, isn't it? You've kind of really a lot of history, a lot of stories, a lot of good and bad times happen in a home, don't they?
I don't understand why when we move people into a care home, we don't put some form of counselling into those that are capable of it. Look at some form of antidepressant medication because there is just no way. You've either lost because you can't manage your own self and there's been a slow decline. You've either lost because the person who was looking after you died and you've now got to go into a care home. And you've lost the place that you considered your home for a very long time. Are you telling me that doesn't impact? Because I don't believe that. And what's more, I'll put you in there and I'll take away everything that you ever did for yourself.
Yeah, no, for sure.
If you're not doing your own ironing, your own cleaning, your own washing, your own buying, your own clothes, all of those kinds of things, how would you not feel completely demoralised? Because I would.
Yeah, massive changes in life, massive
Too big.
circumstances, no?
Well, they say, isn't it? The three biggest things of the things that cause stress in life and change is moving out, getting married, and losing someone you love. Not necessarily in that order. Chances are you've already hit 2.
Yeah.
And you're moving into a care service. And we don't consider that massive impact as a nation. The GPs aren't considering it. Are we insane?
Yeah.
How could you not?
Yeah, no, it's definitely crazy. If you like use my nan again as an example. She's 89. We've actually just moved her closer to where we all live but she was in her previous house for 55, 60 years. And she's been at this place now for maybe a year, and she's now only really just
starting
feeling herself again, treating it as home because she and there's a lot of, and I think there's a lot of people in that circle, that didn't move very often, do you know what I mean? Like it's more frequently now that people move.
Relationships with the next door neighbour and the girl across the road and the woman in the cafe round the corner where they went every day.
Yeah.
And all of those relationships as tentatively and as not as particularly my best mates. But they were important because they were their human contact on the daily basis.
Familiar faces and, people that would wave to you. It's just the little things that really
those little
made them.
Hi, Josh, how are you doing? Great.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
You're looking good, lad. And you were off for the day, mate.
You're happy. Yeah. That little smile, I think, changes your perception on your day, doesn't it? Little things.
Yeah, we just don't. I don't believe we take that significant psychological blow into account because it's huge.
Yeah, no, and I've never actually really thought of it that way.
Yeah, but if I did it to you tomorrow, what would you feel?
Yeah, you'd be like, everything that you thought you knew is different, isn't it?
You'd be bereft.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would. You'd be in grief, absolute grief. So, it's always one that bothered me immensely, and it was.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, really fair point, and that would be, I think, that would make. And potentially it would impact, not just impact people's stay in these homes, but impact the length of time they're in these places if you kind of give them that support to go into them.
Yeah, and again, it will depend. If you've just spent 6 months in a hospital and now going into a care home. You're excited because you're going to go back home.
Yeah.
That's a very different one. That's
Yeah, yeah.
re-enablement, and you're going back home. You're excited. This is coming towards the end of the journey. What have I got to do to get me back to my house?
Anyone
where
wants to
I
get out of
want to go?
hospital, don't they? For sure.
I want out. Well, who would want to stay in hospital? You know, there's you, a bed, 4 other people on a count bedside cabinet. Come on.
Yeah. 2 days is several days is too long, I think, sometimes.
Oh,
You
yeah,
just-
yeah.
They're not nice places, are they?
I was possibly the worst hospital patient you could ever have. I wanted out. I wasn't well enough, but I wanted
Yeah.
out. I mean, the level of boredom is immense.
Yeah. Now I've spent a few days in hospital for various things, and yeah, it's
So imagine you've got dementia and you're a bit confused and you're in hospital. The level of impact of that, even just for 3-4 days, that's immense. That's immense. You know what I mean? So let's move away from that particular one. But if you are in the care home and moving into a care home permanently, that's huge.
yeah. There's definitely some support needed for even if it's the first 3 months of their stay, just to help him settle in,
So
isn't
why
it?
would
Really?
you think that people who were struggling are going to be nice to you? You know, if I'm moving Julie Garrity and Josh McDonald into this care home and they've both lived 50 years in this place, and I'm moving them in, and they're going to be looked after by these whippersnappers as they
Yeah.
see them, and I've just taken everything away, why would I expect that Julie's even going to be remotely polite to them? She's pissed.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And she's getting cold cups of tea. She's really not happy.
She's because she probably didn't want to move.
Yeah, yeah.
Family have persuaded her, or social services have said, no, you're going to have to. But she's pissed. And if you think that you can walk in with a hiya, Julian, here's a cup of tea, and not end up with a gobful, why would you believe that you're that either? These are real difficult first few months. And to believe that people just walk in and the care staff just smile and everything in the garden is roses is ridiculous.
Yeah. No, that's a really opened my eyes up to a way to think about it, really. And yeah, no, there definitely needs to be something done to
There does.
support that
There needs
to
to be a
support
lot
that
more
movement.
support in that. Yeah, if you are, let's say, learning disabilities or something like that, it's a very big and different between elder care and learning disabilities and mental health. And for starters, there's far more money in LD than there is in elder care. But that will always have a transition. So moving from one place to another, most of the time it'll be 6 to 12 months transition plan. Most elderly people, it's been a dramatic change. It's not a rush, but it's certainly a couple of months. You know what I mean? Sometimes it can be a rapid assessment team of rats, which it never ceases to make me laugh. We call it rats. And it happened overnight. They fell, fractured their hip. They can't go home now. They have to go, those kinds of things. It's very different. But that transition and that bit of extra time and money that you can have in there, there's bugger all money in adult social care for elderly people. Well, it's like 10 times for learning disabilities, with the idea that we are going to re-enable a lot of these people and help them to move and live from a care service accommodation to supported living to independently, to do that, which is that's very differently. And you may never achieve it, but there'll be a lifetime of attempting to achieve it, which is why there's more money in it. But it breaks my heart. Absolutely breaks
Yeah,
my
no,
heart.
I think that's massive, and no, that's definitely something that hopefully will be looked into.
But it breaks my heart to see a 60-bedded care service is acceptable for people at the end of their lives, but not for somebody with a learning disability.
Yeah,
And I can't have a little 3-bedroomed house with 3 elderly people, or a bungalow with 3 elderly people living in it, because actually that's so non-cost effective. I actually can't even afford to pay the staff out of that, let alone put the gas and the electricity. But I can have that for learning disabilities, but I can't have it for my nan. That just doesn't feel fair.
no,
It doesn't feel fair, and it feels as though elderly people are being discriminated against somehow.
yeah, no, it definitely, yeah, I can see that, and no, I completely understand and see that point of view for sure.
Yeah, it broke my heart. But at the same time, we do have a model that exists because we don't have the same culture. The multi-generational housing that we used to have has gone. Your family all used to live on the same street. They've moved. Half of them are 30, 40, 50 miles away. They used to be 2 doors down. And I'll just go and knock up on our Josh, make sure he's out of bed, will you, love? Those kinds of things. They've gone. The culture has changed. So when you get to other countries, even their culture's starting to change. So you get to places like China, where did used to be all in one house, but things have changed. People have moved. And if you look at their care home model, you would absolutely think, what are they doing here? This is awful. Because it's pretty much like the old wards used to be in hospitals pre-1984, where you got a bed and a bedside cabinet.
Yeah, and that's not right, is it? That's not in 2024. That is not the way anywhere should be in the world.
I can remember doing my nurse training and working on the geriatric wards, as they were called, and invariably, you're not talking about somebody these were old people who had no one to look after them and nowhere to live or whatever, different reasons, and geriatric wards, and they were that busy, and you were that short-staffed. I was a smoker at that time, and myself and my other colleague, who was a student as well, would be trying to shower people, hanging out the bathroom window having a fag, because it was the only chance we were going to get. We weren't going to get a cup of coffee. We weren't going to get a break. You might get some lunch if you were really lucky. But the only time I could have a cigarette was trying to shower people, hanging out the bathroom window, thinking I'm going to get fired here. But I've got no choice, because I can't leave for a cigarette because there won't be enough staff. And I can remember one lady who I will never forget, and she had lived on this ward for 10 years. 10 years.
Oh, wow.
10 years. Massive issues. The thing about it was, you always knew where she was by the piles of poo, because she was incontinent.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Oh, it was awful. And you're thinking to yourself, this is no way to treat somebody who's been a young woman, who's had a life, and is now not able to tell me anymore because she's dementia, she's unaware, and she spent 10 years here.
Yeah. You're not really living, are you? You're kind of...
You're not. You're existing. You're contained. You're existing.
And that's the sad part, isn't it? You're still, regardless of your circumstance, you should still be living, isn't it? Yeah.
But that's gone. And that was a good thing that went. But, the other countries that are starting to find that the breakdown of multi-generational housing are starting to find that that's where they're going to now. It's a different culture.
Yeah. No, brilliant. Well, we'll wrap up. One more question. It might not be a straightforward answer, but we'll give it a go. What would you to new kind of managers that are kind of due to have their first inspection, what kind of advice would you give to them to kind of support them along their way?
My answer is, do it right every day. What's the problem on the day CQC? Walk through the door.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get good systems, get good processes in place, be confident in your assurance, be confident in your staff, and when CQC walk through the door, it makes no bloody difference, because you should be doing that any day, every way. Now, I do know things can go wrong, because that's the nature of it, but I would never prep for a CQC inspection. Why would I? I should be doing it anyway. I would never be making forms for the value of CQC. So what? They'll ask me a question, I'll find the relevant bit of information for them, or they can go and find it themselves, or whatever, but you never prep. Do not be prepping for a CQC inspection, because you should be doing it anyway. It should be ingrained into the culture. It should be part of what you deliver on a daily basis. You should be meeting those requirements and those regulations, because that's your mum, your dad, your relative in there. So why aren't you delivering it to that standard anyway?
Yeah, no, cracking advice. Thank you so much.
All right, take care. Bye.